Okay, strap in everyone, because today we're diving headfirst into the world of corporate governance. And judging by the stack of resources you sent our way, textbooks, research papers, the whole shebang, it is clear you're not here to play around. You want to become a corporate governance guru. And that's exactly what we're here to do.
We'll uncover those hidden gems, those aha moments, and yes, even delve into those juicy corporate scandals.
You know, it's fascinating that you included the state of corporate governance research in your materials.
Oh.
Yeah, it tells me you're not just interested in the what of corporate governance, but the why, the driving forces behind how companies operate in the real world. This is going to be an insightful deep dive. It's about to get real, that's for sure. We'll be tackling shareholder rights, peeking behind the boardroom curtains, maybe even uncovering a scandal or two along the way. Basically, everything you need to know about corporate governance. But don't worry, no boring lectures here.
And I think a good place to start, to really set the stage, is to clarify what we even mean by corporate governance, because, let's face it, it's evolved quite a bit.
It's definitely more than just, like, stopping CEOs from going full Wolf of Wall Street.
Way more to it. It's about establishing a system, a framework, a set of guidelines, if you will, to make sure companies are managed responsibly and ethically.
So it's less about handcuffs, more about guardrails to keep things on track.
Yeah. Precisely. And a big part of that is ensuring companies don't just focus solely on profits for shareholders, but also consider the interests of all their stakeholders. They need to be held accountable, and that's where good corporate governance comes in.
Speaking of shareholders, their role has really changed over the years, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And to understand that shift, we have to rewind to a pivotal moment in corporate governance history, the Cadbury Report. Imagine, it's 1992, a string of high-profile companies have just crumbled, investors are in a frenzy, and the big question is, how do we prevent this from happening again? The Cadbury Report emerges in the UK, a landmark report laying out best practices, really pushing for independent directors on boards. And you know what?
What's that?
It really did set the stage for the modern corporate governance landscape we see today.
Wow, 1992, that's quite a legacy. But the business world is constantly changing, right?
Yeah.
How has corporate governance kept up?
It's been a constant dance of adaptation. One of the biggest shifts has been the move away from solely focusing on shareholder value to considering a broader spectrum of stakeholders. Employees, the environment, even the communities where a company operates. There's a growing realization that long-term success requires looking beyond just share prices.
Right. That reminds me of something I came across in that academic paper from SOS, University of London, that you sent.
Exactly. Their argument is that in today's globalized, interconnected world, companies can't just chase short-term profits.
It's about playing the long game.
Exactly. Considering the wider impact of their actions, environmental, social, the whole 9 yards. Because if they don't, it could backfire, damaging their reputation, their relationships, and ultimately their bottom line in the long run.
It's like that saying, penny wise, pound foolish. Trying to save a few bucks by cutting corners today can cost you everything tomorrow.
Couldn't have said it better myself, and it's something investors are starting to scrutinize much more closely.
So, we've established that corporate governance is about playing the long game and creating value for all stakeholders. But how do those noble ideals translate to the real world?
Ah, the million-dollar question. And that's where we get into the nitty-gritty of boardroom dynamics, shareholder influence, and those often unsung heroes, the non-executive directors. But I think that's a conversation for another time, wouldn't you say?
All right, so we're stepping into the arena where the magic happens, the boardroom. I have to admit, I'm picturing those intense discussions, the power suits, maybe even a mahogany table or two.
Well, while the reality might not always be straight out of a Hollywood movie, the stakes are definitely real.
Right.
Your corporate governance in practice textbook actually does a fantastic job of breaking down those key players in the boardroom and how their roles can really make or break a company.
So it's not as simple as just one person calling all the shots.
Not in a well-functioning system, no.
Yeah.
You've got the chair, the CEO, your executive directors, your non-executive directors.
Right.
And let's not forget about that crucial senior independent director.
Oh, yeah, they're important.
Each one has a very specific role to play, and it's when you have that balance of power, a clear understanding of responsibilities, and honestly, a healthy dose of constructive debate that things really start to click.
Okay, so let's break down those roles a bit further, shall we? We've got the chair. What's their primary jam?
You can think of the chair as the conductor of an orchestra. They're setting the agenda for those board meetings, guiding those discussions.
Keeping everyone on track.
Exactly. And perhaps most importantly, making sure that everyone has a voice and that all perspectives are heard.
Right, right.
Then you've got your CEO, who's really responsible for the day-to-day operations of the company, putting that board's strategic vision into action.
Okay. And what about those non-executive directors? Those have always seemed a bit like wild cards to me.
You know what? They are. And that's why they're so crucial. They bring that fresh perspective, that outsider's view that can challenge assumptions, prevent groupthink, that sort of thing. Your textbook, it really emphasizes how vital their independence is. They shouldn't be beholden to the CEO or have any conflicts of interest.
So they're like the guardians of good governance, making sure everything's on the up and up.
That's a great way to put it. They're there to protect the interests of the shareholders, ensuring that the company is being run ethically and responsibly. And if red flags pop up...
They're blowing the whistle.
Exactly.
Now, what about that senior independent director? What makes them so special?
Well, they act as a safeguard, especially in those sticky situations where there might be a conflict of interest involving, say, the chair or the CEO. They're that mediator, that neutral party, ensuring everyone has their say and that decisions are made with the company's best interests at heart.
That's a crucial role. So we've got all these different characters, each with their own part to play, but does it always go smoothly in the boardroom? Are there ever, clashes?
Oh, absolutely. Boardroom showdowns are not unheard of, and that brings us to that fascinating case of Polly Peck that your textbook highlights.
Oh, right. Wasn't that the one with that charismatic CEO and that sudden, out-of-nowhere share price crash?
The one and only. It's a classic cautionary tale of what can go wrong when there's an imbalance of power at the top, a dominant CEO, not enough independent oversight from the board. Azil Nadir, the CEO, he had that star power, delivered impressive short-term results. But beneath the surface, things were, shall we say, a little murky.
Those accounting irregularities always seem to pop up, don't they?
Right. The board, they lacked the independence and that diversity of thought to really challenge his decisions. And what happened?
Oh.
Polly Peck, they went belly up, just like that, taking shareholder investments down with them. A stark reminder of why board composition and that balance of power are absolutely crucial.
It's like checks and balances, but for corporations.
Exactly. You need those diverse voices, those different perspectives in the room to prevent those kinds of disasters from happening.
And that actually connects with that state of corporate governance research paper you shared. They talked about how shareholder activism is really shaking things up when it comes to board composition these days, right?
It's a trend that's definitely picking up steam. Shareholders are becoming much more proactive, demanding that diversity, that independence on boards. They're realizing that a board that actually reflects the diversity of its stakeholders, be it gender, ethnicity, skills, backgrounds,
Right, it just makes sense.
is far more likely to make those sound decisions that benefit everyone. Well, we're not talking about just ticking boxes here, but genuine representation, accountability, the whole 9 yards.
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And that brings us to another major player in the corporate governance game, the shareholders themselves.
Oh, they're not just sitting on the sidelines anymore, are they?
No way. They're finding their voice, actively engaging, demanding change. You even specifically asked about wolf packs, remember?
I did. It's such a, intriguing, maybe even slightly intimidating term. Tell me more about this new breed of shareholder.
Well, it's a force to be reckoned with, that's for sure. Your textbook talks about how you have your institutional investors, your pension funds, even just your regular everyday shareholder.
Banding together.
Exactly. They're forming these wolf packs to really leverage their collective influence and push for change.
So strength in numbers.
Yeah.
Using their combined voting power to make their voices heard.
You've got it. They're pushing for change on everything from executive pay to board diversity to more sustainable and ethical business practices.
So they're not just concerned with profits, but with how those profits are made.
It's about aligning those business goals with values, with long-term sustainability. Take, for instance, engine number one.
Who was that?
They're an activist investor. They actually managed to get 3 members of their own choosing onto ExxonMobil's board.
ExxonMobil, the oil giant.
The one and only.
Yeah.
They argued that Exxon was lagging behind on clean energy and needed to take climate change more seriously.
Wow, so they actually managed to shake things up at one of the biggest oil companies in the world.
They did. And it sent shockwaves through the corporate world.
I bet.
It was a real turning point. demonstrating that shareholder activism, particularly around things like climate change and sustainability, is not to be taken lightly.
That's amazing. Talk about punching above your weight. It seems like the game is changing. It's not just about maximizing shareholder profits anymore.
It's about looking at the bigger picture, aligning those business goals with broader societal and environmental considerations.
Right, right. It's almost as if the very meaning of ownership is being redefined.
100%. Shareholders are increasingly seeing themselves as stewards, as having a responsibility to make sure those companies are being run in a way that benefits not just their portfolios, but society and the environment as well.
This is all incredibly insightful. We've gone from the boardroom's inner workings to the rise of these shareholder activists, and it seems like all roads are leading to this idea of corporate social responsibility and sustainability.
They're all connected, that's for sure.
All right, we're back. We've explored the boardroom, met those shareholder activists, and now it's time to tackle this whole beyond the bottom line idea. I have to say, though, the idea of companies fully embracing corporate social responsibility, sustainability, all that, sometimes it feels a bit...
Gimmicky.
Yeah, like a marketing ploy more than anything else. Is it all just PR spin?
It's a question a lot of people are asking these days, and for good reason. It's easy to be cynical, right? You see companies making these big pronouncements about saving the world, but then their actions don't quite match up.
Exactly. It's like, we care about the environment, but we also really, really need to keep those shareholders happy, so...
But that's precisely where things get interesting. The SOS paper, it argues that this strategic approach to CSR, to sustainability, it's more than just about ethics.
It's about the bottom line.
In a way, yes. But it's about creating long-term value for everyone involved, companies and stakeholders alike.
So it's not just about slapping a green label on something or donating to a charity once a year. It's about weaving these principles into the very DNA of the company.
Now you're getting it. Think about it. Reducing your environmental impact, making sure your supply chains are ethical, fostering diversity in your workforce. It's not just about ticking boxes.
It's about mitigating risk, building a good reputation.
Right. Ultimately, creating a more resilient and, yes, profitable business.
Your corporate governance and practice book had some really interesting examples of this.
Oh, absolutely. Companies like Unilever, for example, with their sustainable living plan, or Patagonia, they're known for their commitment to environmental activism. They're showing the world that walking the walk isn't just good for the planet, it can be good for business.
But what about the companies that don't walk the walk? Are there real consequences for just paying lip service to these ideas?
Oh, there can be, for sure. Consumers are getting savvier, they're demanding more transparency from the companies they support. They're voting with their wallets, choosing brands that align with their values.
And this is where those wolf packs we talked about earlier come back into play, right?
Bingo! Investors are looking at ESG performance, environmental, social governance more and more when making decisions.
Because it impacts their investments.
Exactly. They're pushing companies to up their ESG game because they're realizing it's directly tied to long-term value, a company's ability to weather storms.
And if companies don't shape up, there can be financial hits too.
Absolutely. Your textbook even mentioned cases like Walmart and PetroChina. Both were excluded from big sustainability indexes because of concerns about their social and environmental practices. Being left out of those indexes, it's not just embarrassing. It can really hurt a company's reputation, limit their access to capital, even impact their stock price.
Investors are definitely paying attention, that's for sure.
Oh, they are. And, this ties back to that State of Corporate Governance research paper as well. They talked about how there's more and more evidence that strong ESG performance is linked to better financial performance over the long run, less risk. It's like the companies that are doing good are also doing well.
It's a win-win. This has been such an eye-opening conversation. It's clear that corporate governance is about so much more than just shareholder profits these days.
We've really seen how that traditional narrow view of a corporation is being challenged. Companies are being held accountable not just for their financial performance, but for their impact on the world around them.
As we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is this. Corporate governance is constantly evolving.
It's not static, that's for sure.
Right. We're moving away from that narrow focus on shareholder profit towards something much more holistic. Companies need to acknowledge the needs of all stakeholders, recognize how interconnected business, society, and the environment really are. And this change isn't just driven by some sense of, doing the right thing, though that's important too. It's driven by a growing understanding that sustainable, responsible business practices are just good business.
It's not just about doing good. It's good business sense.
Exactly. And the exciting part is we're still early in this shift. As consumers, investors, companies, as we all keep pushing for more transparency, more accountability, more sustainability, who knows what innovative approaches to corporate governance we'll see in the years to come.
It's an exciting time to be paying attention. Well, we've covered so much ground today. Boardroom dynamics, shareholder activism, corporate social responsibility, the whole 9 yards.
We really dug deep.
That's right. And we hope you've gained a much deeper understanding of this complex and, let's face it, always changing world of corporate governance. But as we always say, the learning doesn't stop here. Keep asking those tough questions. Keep digging deeper. Keep challenging those assumptions.
Because it's through that constant exploration, that engagement, that we can create a more sustainable and equitable future for everyone.
Beautifully said. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of corporate governance. We'll be back soon with more thought-provoking topics to explore together. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better tomorrow.